A very good day to you. I'm Howard Feldman. This is the Sunday Synthesis Podcast with me, Howard Feldman, and of course, Dr. Anton Meyberg. It is the 15th of August. We're in a strange position. It's meant to be spring, but it's pretty cold outside in Johannesburg. Very wintry weather, but I suppose spring can be like that. We're also seeing numbers coming down in Gauteng, but not in other parts of the country. Where on earth are we in terms of COVID-19? Dr. Anton Meyberg, good morning again. I hope you had a good break last week.
Good morning. Yes, I had a fantastic break last week. Thanks very much. So where are we? We're somewhere between COVID, ice cold pneumonia, and COVID pneumonia. So we don't actually know where we're going at the moment, but it's a very interesting time to be in weather-wise. So there are currently 207 million cases worldwide with 4.3 million deaths and 186 million cases resolved. The United States has 37.4 million cases with 637,000 deaths. India has 32 million cases with 431,000 deaths. South Africa has 2,595,447 cases with 76,869 deaths and 13,021 new cases in the last 24 hours, a 21.6% test positivity rate. The numbers in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal are screaming up dramatically, whereas in the Western Cape, albeit going up, they are starting to plateau. 10% of South Africans have been vaccinated, with 4 million having been fully vaccinated and 9.3 million having received the jab. There are currently 5,255 cases in the Gauteng hospitals, with 1,028 in ICU and 568 currently ventilated.
So where are we in terms of your hospital? What are you seeing at the moment?
So the numbers in the hospital are dramatically down. We're below 40 cases in the hospital at the moment.
Wow.
We're running on 3 wards at the moment, possibly going to be going down to 2 wards hopefully this week. We still have got extremely critical cases in the ICU, but the numbers have definitely petered down and we're definitely seeing a resolution. In fact, the numbers of non-COVID cases are far outweighing the numbers of COVID cases in the hospital. And that's in inverted commas, a pleasant thought and a pleasant sort of direction to go in, despite the fact that there are many sick people in hospital.
So are you personally in the hospital moving back to business as usual? In other words, seeing normal patients with other conditions?
Yeah, I mean, as of last week, we essentially started seeing patients in our rooms again, and the hospital is definitely going in a direction of, as you call it, normal business again, albeit that obviously we still are aware that there are COVID patients in hospital, and you still can spread the disease, and it still is highly transmissible, so we're still aware of the fact that it's still there.
Right, but a few people have asked the question, should they start going back to their regular doctors for their normal checkups? And given where we are...
I think the answer to that is definitely yes. Definitely yes. There's no doubt about that. You need to continue looking after your chronic conditions, see your GPs, see your specialists. As I said, the numbers have come down dramatically, so the healthcare workers are not being inundated with COVID and are actually able to spend time on the non-COVID diseases now as well.
If somebody has, for example, surgery that they've been putting off, whether it's knee surgery or any type of thing where they could wait a little bit longer, would now be a good time to start revisiting that?
Yeah, I think now is definitely a good time to go back for any type of elective surgery. I think the hospitals are open, they're functioning fully, the ICUs are open again. The capacity to take in the non-COVID patients is much higher. And now is the time while the numbers are going down to get back into it and go full force ahead.
Right. Are people still expected to have a COVID test before they go into hospital for any form of surgery or any other condition?
So that hasn't changed. You're still going to need to have a COVID test to make sure that you are COVID negative. It's generally within 72 hours of going into hospital that you have the COVID test, and that will be around for a long time still.
Right. In terms of patients that you're seeing, are you still seeing COVID? Are you seeing COVID patients who have been fully vaccinated?
So the majority of patients that we're seeing that come in hospital with COVID are unvaccinated patients or patients who've only been on ivermectin. The majority of patients, I will reiterate that, are unvaccinated patients. Yes, we do get a few breakthrough infections that come through, and this is generally people who've had their first vaccine out of the 2 vaccines, people who got it in the line. But I think a very important statement to make is that the vaccines aren't like sunscreen. they don't stop the virus from entering your body. They fight for ourselves and they fight for our immune system. They train our immune system how to fight against the virus, how to attack it and how to fight it. And in that way, we can minimize the damage from the virus. And I think people need to understand that. That's a very important concept. That is why when we get these breakthrough cases, it's if you stick a swab in somebody's nose who's actually positive and has been vaccinated, the swab will come out as positive, and that is a breakthrough case. It doesn't mean they're essentially sicker or they're essentially going to die, but they can still be harboring the virus at the time of their vaccination.
I love this idea of the sunscreen. Given all of that, it's very concerning to see what's going on in Israel. Can you take us through some of the items that they're dealing with there?
So I think the biggest issue in Israel is the issue that we've been speaking about for the greater part of the last 18 months, is that we're going to need yearly boosters. We're going to need boosters. We're going to need more vaccine, just like the flu vaccine. I think what we're seeing in Israel is that the effectiveness of the vaccine is fading out or petering out. And we've got to realize that, we've been seeing mutations from the 1918 flu for the last 103 years. There's always going to be mutations of this virus going forward. And, some of the studies from Israel showed that they had 72 people in certain hospitals with 25 critical, 38 that were moderate, and 9 were mild. And they've also noted that the efficacy of the Pfizer has gone down from 90% to 39%, which makes sense after 7 to 8 months of having the vaccine being administered, that the effectivity of the vaccine is going to go down and you are going to need boosters. We know with this Delta variant, it's a highly transmissible variant. It has a high viral load and it causes a lot more of infective and transmissible disease in patients. Therefore, immune suppressed people are going to need a booster. There's no doubt about it. In fact, the CDC have come out with a statement saying that they also believe now that immune suppressed people on dialysis, people who've had solid organ transplants or any other type of transplant, stem cell transplants, will need boosters. So I do still believe, though, they're going to change that and say that everybody's going to need boosters after a certain amount of time. And whether that's going to be 6 months or 8 months, we'll see that. And I think that's why we're seeing that the numbers are starting to go up in Israel. Yes, the numbers are going up and they've got large amounts of cases, but still the mortality, morbidity rate from the actual virus is much lower than it was in their first and second wave. And that's quite dramatic. And there might be vaccinated people that are positive, but they aren't as sick because they've got some sort of immunity from having had the vaccine and from having had COVID previously.
Does the vaccine or does COVID give you greater protection? A number of people have asked this question.
So we know for a fact that the vaccine gives you greater antibody variability and greater immunogenicity and greater cover. But there's no better combination than the vaccine and having had COVID together. We're not pouting out there that you've got to go get COVID now.
I was going to say, for some of us hypochondriacs, that's a bit scary. We don't want COVID.
For all you hypochondriacs out there, you don't want COVID. But the vaccine itself gives you much higher immunogenicity.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. And if someone's had the Johnson, would the booster be in the form of another Johnson later on, or would it likely be in the form of a Pfizer, for example?
So that's a very good question. And I think we still got to wait for further data regarding that. At this point in time, the studies that have come out have shown that people who've had the AstraZeneca and have had an mRNA vaccine have done extremely well, and they've had good response, have good immune responses. They haven't done enough studies yet to show with those who've had a Johnson & Johnson if the next booster will be a Johnson & Johnson or a Pfizer. But if you extrapolate from the AstraZeneca viral vector vaccine, you look at the Johnson & Johnson, ideally an mRNA should be the right one to have, but we'll wait for further trials regarding that. Right, also notably, it's also been noted that the Johnson & Johnson vaccine has shown remarkable effectivity against the Delta variant. And from our own personal experience in our hospitals, when we've seen breakthrough infections, the majority of breakthrough infections have been people who've had the Pfizer, not the Johnson & Johnson. And when I say majority, I'm talking about an extremely small cohort of patients that have come in with breakthrough infections.
With either, actually, but more so with the Pfizer is what you're saying.
With either, but more so with the Pfizer, but very minimal with the Johnson & Johnson.
That is interesting. At this stage, we are soon going to be allowing 18-year-olds and up to get the vaccines. What are your thoughts with regard to under 18s, let's say 12 to 18-year-olds?
I can't understand why we haven't started the 12-year-olds to 18-year-olds either. The sooner, the better. We need to get this going. It's done overseas. The CDC have given the go-ahead for it. They're doing it in the United States. They're doing it in Europe. We need to get the Pfizer vaccine given to our 12-year-olds and above. We know it's safe. We know it's efficacious. We know that the effectivity is very good, and we need to get them vaccinated.
Are you seeing vaccine resistance in conversations that you're having?
No, we haven't seen vaccine resistance. But once again, we're looking at a smaller cohort of patients in all around the world. Remember, we've got a minimal amount, 10% of our population have been vaccinated. So that's not enough yet to see any type of resistance. But we do have our general anti-vaxxers. There's going to be anti-vaxxers. And in fact, this week, a so-called prominent doctor came out with a call against vaccination. And I mean, it just shows that those type of people are not involved in frontline work. They may have been in their heyday in great doctors and greatly involved in serious pioneering work. But when push comes to shove, they're not there on the front line.
What motivates a person of science to go this route? Because you really do have to rely on all sorts of non-science related data.
I think everyone just wants their day. Everyone wants to be heard. And, as I say, if you're not involved and you're not actually on the front line treating those patients, then you've got to have your 2 cents to say something, because otherwise you're feeling you're being left out.
A few people asking about masks. And, well, first of all, I guess the one question is, how long will it be that we still have to wear masks outdoors, outdoor gatherings, things like that? And then the second part of it, which I want to get onto, but let's deal with this first, will be around children and masks.
So look, I think the question is, how long is a piece of string? We don't know how long we're going to have to wear masks. But what's interesting is that the CDC guidelines have come out, and this is now in a country where you've got a large proportion of people that have been vaccinated. Millions of people have been vaccinated. And they say if you have been vaccinated and you are exposed, then 3 to 5 days after your exposure, you need to test. And at the time of your exposure, you need to put masks on for the next 14 days, unless you test negative. If you test positive, then you've got to go into quarantine. So it's very different from country to country. It's very different from continent to continent, depending on where you're at in your pandemic and where you're at in your amount of vaccinations. Regarding masks, the United States and the CDC and the Pediatrics Council of the United States have come out with a statement saying that any child above the age of 2 should be wearing a mask. Now, we know how difficult that is, but there's no reason why a 5-year-old cannot wear a mask. They've done it. We've done it in this country very effectively. The children manage. They have mask breaks, whether it be for every 15 minutes, but they do manage. It doesn't curtail them, and they're able to do it. So we are still going to be wearing masks for a long time. Whether or not it will be in our own personal capacities in our homes once people are vaccinated will probably be less so, but it will be more so when you're going to the shops and when you're going to public gatherings. But I think it will sort of slowing down when we actually got a bigger cohort of people who are vaccinated.
We're about 2 or 3 weeks away from some of the major Jewish festivals, for example. And I know a lot of people are wondering how many people they could have over, what they should do, how they should do it. All right, the weather's pretty miserable at the moment. Hopefully in the next 2 weeks it'll settle down and be a bit warmer and we could maybe be outdoors or again. But how should people be looking towards the Jewish festivals or any gatherings in terms of family and larger groups, and especially when there are older people around?
Look, I think safety is our first priority here. We've got to keep people safe. We've got to make sure that we don't spread the virus. We're in a very different situation to where we were this time last year with regards to vaccination. So we know that people have been vaccinated, but always remember that the vaccination is not a get out of jail free. You've still got to follow the rules. You've still got to wear your masks. You've still got to social distance. But I do believe going on in the direction we're going, we will be able to have 1 or 2 families over for meals on the Jewish holidays, as long as we social distance, as long as we can do it outside or with good ventilation or in areas. And obviously, if everyone's vaccinated, it makes it much easier. We know that the children aren't vaccinated, but we obviously got to keep everybody separated to a degree where they can't spread the virus to each other.
Yeah, or don't have them.
Look, I think we've been through enough punishment in the last 18 months to become hermits and to become social,
No, of course. Yeah, I think that's right. I think
people. But I think it's time now that we can do these things, but we just
and
got to do
should,
them
maybe.
safely, so we don't become super spreading events. The institution, the religious institutions have got to make sure they follow the rules. Last year everyone was praying outside in tents and they can still do that. There's no reason to stop that.
Is there still a regulation in terms of timing for religious services?
So the regulation is with the numbers, but I think the timing is important still because, if you can keep the timing down, you keep the amount of people that are in a small environment together for a smaller portion of time,
Sure.
There's less time to sort of cohabit with each other and less time to actually move around.
Yeah.
And also the most important thing is everyone loves a short service.
That is true. And you can only be expected to behave for a certain amount of time. Most of us.
Is that only for our hypochondriac ADHD people?
Well, this is more about the ADHD business and the fact that I like to talk to people, but that's probably something. It's not something completely different. It actually is completely relevant. All right, let's take a look at some of the other questions. If a person contracts COVID both after both vaccines, how long will that immunity last for?
So look, it depends on the timing of the contraction of the COVID. If you get the COVID at the time, a week or two after the actual vaccination, or even if you get it at a later stage, you should have immunity for the next few months going forward. But once again, that doesn't mean that you're out of jail. It doesn't mean that you can just go out without a mask and walk around people. We still don't know, and we still think that you can transfer the virus to other people despite being vaccinated. So you still got to be careful, but you can still live a bit.
Ahova says, is it possible to explain what seems to be happening in Israel? I think you've done that. But I think a question is one that so many people are echoing, that they're having COVID outbreaks there, back to masks. The important part of the question is there hope? And I think that what a lot of people are feeling is we've looked to
there's
Israel.
Definitely hope. I think you've got to look at not only Israel. Look at Israel, look at the United Kingdom, look at the two different stances the two countries are having. Whereas Israel is going back into lockdown, the United Kingdom are opening up, and they're treating the infections like they treat influenza. So yes, they may be having 25 to 30,000 infections a day, but the hospital numbers are down dramatically. The severe cases are down dramatically, and they're carrying on living life, like very much similar to influenza. And yes, we're going to get different variations. We're going to get different mutations. As I said earlier, the 1918 flu pandemic, we're still seeing variations and mutations from that, yet we're able to live through it and we're able to continue with it. We need to have much more people vaccinated in order for us to get through this quicker, but that will come with time. And I still say, look back to this time last year, we were in a much more different situation. It was much bleaker. We didn't know that it was going to last for so long. And yes, it will go on for longer, but we're definitely better at fighting it. And I do believe the scientists and the academics are putting into place different types of vaccines for different types of variants, as well as they'll be bringing out oral vaccines, which will play a huge role in fighting off this pandemic.
Well, it's interesting because if I think back to last year, your recommendation to me was not to go to synagogue over Rosh Hashanah. This year, it's a very, very different situation. Interestingly, Anne says once most people have been vaccinated, COVID will still be around, but not as a severe threat. Perhaps that's maybe when masks will be a thing of the past. Thinking they'll slowly fade as COVID becomes less of a pervasive issue, much like HIV, no longer a headline issue. Would Dr. Meyberg agree with this?
Yeah, actually, I do agree. And I think that in a number of years' time, we'll be looking at COVID like we look at TB. In other words, it's an endemic disease and we wear our masks and we carry on with it. I mean, if you know that most of the South Africans probably have been exposed to TB in their lives and they've got antibodies to it, doesn't mean that they've actually contracted it. They've got good immunities and they can fight through it and they can fight above it due to their immune responses. And so too will it be like that with COVID in the future. So we'll be going into wards wearing different types of masks. I still believe that most medical doctors will still be wearing masks in their rooms when they see patients for the foreseeable future, because we've seen what a dramatic impact it makes on the spreading of viruses and on bacteria to and from patients and to from healthcare workers.
Aviva says, my elderly father is going on a flight. Are there any extra precautions he should be taking? We've been through this a few times, but I think it's worth reiterating.
Yeah, I also do. I think it's very important to know that, albeit the flight is important, it's the time before the flight, the time after the flight that's as important. So when they're in the airport, they've got to social distance, they've got to keep their mask on and keep their visor on. Try as much as possible not to eat or drink on the flight. I mean, it's not always easy, but the moment you break that seal, the moment you take that mask off, the moment you take your visor off, you are more prone to getting the disease spread to you. So keep the mask on, keep the visor on, and try to keep social distance at the beginning, at the end of the journeys.
Dana says, I've just had surgery. Is it okay to get my second jab? I'm going to answer for Dr. Meyberg. He's going to tell you to talk to your doctor because we don't really know enough details. Am I right? Have I been doing this for long enough?
Yeah, so you've been doing this for long enough. You have to speak to your doctor. But generally, if it's minor surgery, you can have your vaccine within 2 weeks thereafter. But if it's something more than minor surgery, speak to your doctor, and they might say you might have to wait a month or so.
Cheryl says, are these copper masks safe? Aren't you breathing in copper?
These copper masks are extremely effective. They are very good, and they last for a long time. You can wear them for a week at a time. They have been shown from the beginning of COVID to actually halt the production or the spread of the virus, and they are really effective masks. So they are something really good to look into.
Yeah, I must say I've been using them and I find them comfortable. And the fact is that you can keep re-wearing them, which is also great. Is it safe for immunocompromised teachers who are fully vaccinated to get back into the classrooms?
Look, if you were in the classroom last year and you weren't vaccinated, and now you're going back to the classroom and you are vaccinated, obviously it's much safer. We do know that at one stage we are going to need boosters for our immune-compromised people. And we also got to delineate what is immune-compromised and what is not. But as long as you are keeping up your bubbles, and as long as you're keeping your social distance, as long as you keep your mask on the whole time and your students are keeping the mask on the whole time, then it's safe.
Yeah, and finally, there was one question that I actually wanted to get to, but a few people asking, here we go, if you've had the COVID Delta and have been vaccinated since, is it possible to get it again?
So look, if you've had Delta and you've been vaccinated, it's unlikely that you'll get it within the first few weeks thereafter, even maybe sort of 4 to 8 weeks thereafter. But once again, we don't know that you cannot spread it to other people. So you may not mount a response in your body, but you can still harbor it and transfer it to other people if you come in contact with other people. And that's the biggest issue that we've got at this moment.
Right. And the Lambda variant, do we need to panic? Because I feel a bit panicked about that.
No, we don't need to panic about that at this point in time.
Okay, good.
We still got to wait to see. Right now, we're dealing with one sort of issue at a time. And the issue we're dealing with now has been the Delta. This has been our predominant strain that we've been dealing with. This has been an extremely, extremely difficult strain. And to say that we're not out the woods, the Western Cape are slowly getting there, but Eastern Cape, KwaZulu-Natal are still in their peak and the numbers are still going up dramatically. So although the numbers in Gauteng are much better, we're still in a lot of trouble here. And the other thing we're also seeing here is that people are slowly starting to stop wanting to get vaccinated. As things get better, the mentality of people is, well, things are better, maybe I don't need to be vaccinated. We need to push vaccination. We need to get as many people vaccinated as possible. And I'm not sure why they haven't opened up with 18-year-olds yet. I don't know why we've got to wait till the 1st of September. They've got enough vaccines. They need to push.
Yeah, 100%. So there's good news. There does seem to be good news.
Yeah, there's great news. The numbers are going down. The numbers in the hospitals are going down. Salah scored in the opening game of the season, his 5th consecutive season of scoring his opening goal. Liverpool, you champions. 3-0 win with a clean sheet. You'll never walk alone. And to quote, you are free to make whatever choice you want, but you are not free from the consequences of your choice. Have a good week, be safe, and look after yourself.
Absolutely right. I really, really love that. I'm Howard Feldman. This has been the Sunday Synthesis podcast with me, Howard Feldman, and Dr. Anton Meyberg. Don't forget to subscribe below so that you could get all of our podcasts. Have a fantastic week. Be warm, be safe, and God bless.